All praise is due to Allah and the person of Master Muhammad. My name is Brother Minister YaSin Allah, and I'm here to deliver the preachings and teachings of the most honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad, that the black man is God, the white man is the devil, that we living in the change of worlds, that the old wicked world of the white man is going out, the world of murder, lies, and robbery, and the new world of the black man is coming in, the world of freedom, justice, and equality. And this time that we're living in is commonly known as the judgment. As Mr. Muhammad said on numerous occasions, don't think that the judgment is something to come. We are living in the judgment now. Alhamdulillah. Our subject today is a continuation of part 2 of the Israelites, chapter 17 of the Qur'an. And before we begin our subject, we'd like to open up in the name of Allah and the person of Master Muhammad, the great Mahdi, who was to come and has come to restore us who are lost from our own the kingdom of Islam, and to destroy those who have destroyed us. Thou art our God, O Allah, we are thy people. Deliver us from our murderers, and we will serve and obey thee all the days of our life, and teach our children thine equal love and mercy for us. Alhamdulillah. Some may question or wonder why I'm not opening up with chapter 1 of the Holy Qur'an, the Fatiha. And the reason why I chose to open up in this prayer from the end of Message to the Black Man by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is just to reinforce the idea of truth that the most Honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad taught us, that Allah came in the person of Master Muhammad, and that we are under his teachings, Master Muhammad's teachings, for 1,000 years. And that Master Muhammad is a fulfillment of the Mahdi, or the coming of the great Mahdi of the Muslims, and the Messiah of the Jews, and the second coming of Jesus of the Christians. Alhamdulillah. Our subject, as I said, is a continuation of chapter 17 of the Quran, the Israelites. And the name itself, the Israelites, we should all know, all the Muslims should know, that when we're talking about Israelites, from the Holy Qur'an especially, we're talking about the white race. And over the years, especially since Mr. Muhammad left us, there's been a lot of misinformation, disinformation, that there is no race in Islam. But we must understand that the Quran is very emphatic, very clear in indicting the white race for straying away or violating the law of Moses, which was given to the white race 4,000 years ago. So chapter 17, the Quran, the Israelites, is speaking about the white race. And let us also bear in mind that Israel is the other name of Yaakov, or Jacob. In the Bible, chapter 32, in the book of Genesis, remember that Jacob's name was changed from Jacob to Israel, and this is where we get the name Israel from. And they are different definitions of the name Israel, but the one I think that fits the white race the best is the striver with God. That the white race is in a competition, if you will, or opposition against God, hence striver with God. Some definitions say soldier of God too, but that really doesn't accurately define the word or the actions of the white race. Alhamdulillah. Chapter 17, the Quran, opens up. The verses that we're going to concentrate on are verses 1 through 8. And I'll start with verse 1. Glory be to him who carried his servant tonight from the sacred mosque to the remote mosque, whose precincts we bless, that we might show him of our signs. Chapter 17, in addition to dealing with the white race, also records a vision, if you will, or a dream that Prophet Muhammad had. And in this vision or dream, Prophet Muhammad was in Mecca, and that he rode a white horse to Jerusalem. And at Jerusalem, he led all the prophets in prayer, and then he ascended through the 7 heavens And ultimately, in the seventh heaven, he met God, Allah, face to face, in person. Alhamdulillah. So this journey or this dream or vision of Prophet Muhammad is known as Isra and Miraj. Isra and Miraj signify two different aspects, if you will, of the dream or the vision of Prophet Muhammad. And part of the significance of Prophet Muhammad going to Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem ascending through the seven heavens and meet God face to face, is symbolically saying or teaching that Islam will triumph over the white race. Jerusalem being the spiritual home, if you will, of the Jews, and for him to rise above the temple in Jerusalem through the seven heavens and meet God face to face is symbolically saying that Islam or the black nation will triumph or ascend over the white race. Alhamdulillah. Because remember, this is another indication showing that the white race's rule over the planet Earth is temporary. It's only for 6,000 years. So here's another good example to show that the prophecies of the scriptures teach that, yes, ultimately Islam or the black nation will regain the rule of the planet. Alhamdulillah. Now, when Prophet Muhammad, just to briefly reiterate, when Prophet Muhammad ascended through the seven heavens, he met all the prophets as he was ascending through the different levels of heaven. And he was conducted through the seven heavens by Gabriel, or Jibril, the angel. And in the seventh heaven, he met God face to face. And you can find this recorded actually in detail and hadith, for the traditions and sayings of Prophet Muhammad in Bukhari's hadith. Bukhari being the scholar who compiled one of the hadiths, and his hadith is probably the most famous and extensive. Anyway, while Prophet Muhammad, according to Bukhari, was in the seventh heaven, God, Allah, told him to make the people, he wanted the people to pray 50 times a day. And when Prophet Muhammad came back from talking with God, Musa asked him, what did God say? And he said he wants the people to pray 50 times a day. So Musa said, that's too much. Go back and, tell Allah, if you will, that's too much. They can't do it. And Prophet Muhammad went back, and so Allah lowered the number of prayers. And this went on a few times. Each time that Prophet Muhammad came back and said that Allah lowered the number, Musa said, no, that's too much. So ultimately, Allah lowered the number of prayers to 5 times a day. Pray 5 times a day, and so that's would amount to 50 prayers a day. Alhamdulillah. So this is very interesting in itself, but let us remember too that Prophet Muhammad was teaching the white race, if you will, and so I think the inference is that these are people that need to be in prayer all the time. Not that we don't think prayer is important or that we should pray, but just remember the most honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad taught us, in addition to prayer, that prayer is better than sleep. He also taught us that teaching is better than prayer. So let us bear that in mind. Alhamdulillah. Verse 2, chapter 17. And we gave Moses the book and made it a guidance to the children of Israel, saying, take no guardian besides me. Now, we should all know from our lessons and the basic teachings of the Most Honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad, that the white race is under the law of Moses. And Moses, after the white race was exiled into the caves and hillsides of Europe for 2,000 years, we, the black nation, sent them a prophet or guide or a messenger under the name of Musa, and he taught the white race all their first lessons of civilization. And these lessons were embodied in the book that is now known as the Torah. And generally speaking, the Torah is about the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and also known as the Pentateuch. And this is the law of Moses. This is the law that the white race is under, which can be summed up in the 10 Commandments as well. And the white race is under the covenant that they will follow this law as for being blessed to rule. For being blessed to rule the earth for 6,000 years, the agreement or the covenant is that they follow the law of Moses. And we all know that the white race, or we should know that the white race broke the covenant, that they did not follow the law of Moses. And when you read the Bible, that's the theme of the Bible. After receiving the law of Moses, that they broke the covenant, or they wouldn't follow the law of Moses. You know, they started worshiping the golden calf and wanted a king to be ruled by a king instead of being ruled by Allah. And so they broke the covenant. And this is one of the great indictments against the white race. And we made known to the children of Israel in the book, certainly you will make mischief in the land twice and behave insolently with mighty arrogance. That's verse 4. So the Quran is here capsulizing that the white race will be chastised with 2 great chastisements for violating the law of Moses. So when of the 2 the first warning came to pass, we raised against you our servants of mighty prowess, so they made havoc in your houses, and it was an accomplished threat. So historically, this is referring to when the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar invaded Jerusalem and sacked the city, killed many of the inhabitants or the Jews, and deported them or transported them back to Babylon to be their slaves. And if you read the book of Daniel, this is what the book of Daniel, the little children, if you will, as the book of Daniel records it, were servants to the Babylonians. This is what that's talking about. This is after the invasion and deportation of the Jews back to Babylon. And historically, and the Bible records this as well, while the Jews were in Babylonian captivity, the Babylonians themselves were conquered by the Persians under Cyrus. And while the Jews were under Persian domination, they were able to convince Cyrus to allow them to go back to Jerusalem. And eventually Cyrus agreed with them. But before they could go back, Cyrus died. And Darius became Cyrus's successor. So they had to start again. But again, eventually and ultimately, they convinced Darius to allow them to go back to Jerusalem out of Babylonian captivity. So the Jews were led by Zerubbabel, according to the Bible, back to Jerusalem. So in other words, their chastisement was complete. They were given a reprieve, if you will, and allowed to go back, and from a spiritual point of view, to see if they will follow the law of Moses this time. And you can find this recorded in the Bible in the book of Ezra and the Haggai and Zechariah as well. And just also on a side note, a sidebar, if you will, remember that Zerubbabel, the one who led the Jews back to Jerusalem, is revered by the Masons as an ancient Grand Master, which we'll touch on that a little later in the video. Then we gave you back the turn against them, and aided with wealth and children, and made you a numerous band. So once the Jews were back in Jerusalem, and they rebuilt the temple under Ezra and his successors, they were blessed. So they were given a reprieve from chastisement to see if they could follow the law of Moses. However, remember that the history of the Jews, or the white race, is that they continually disobeyed the law of Moses. They rejected the prophets. They made fun of the prophets. They mocked the prophets, and ultimately they killed the prophets. So when the second warning came, we raised another people that they might enter the mosque as they entered it the first time, and that they might destroy whatever they conquered with utter destruction. So after the Jews rejected the righteous prophet, our brother Jesus, or Isa, they were chastised again. So history says about 70 years after the death of Jesus, which the Jews instigated the Romans to kill Jesus, they rejected him, said that he was a product of fornication and he wasn't a real prophet. The Romans under Titus put down Roman rebellion in Jerusalem, and they utterly destroyed the city. They burnt it. They killed as many inhabitants as they could, sacked the city, took what they wanted, did what they wanted, and the city was completely destroyed. And this is, according to the historians, the beginning of the Jewish diaspora, when the Jews fled Jerusalem and fled to different parts of the world. Some of them went to Arabia and different places in the known world at that time. So they were scattered as a chastisement, the second great chastisement in their history. So just so we don't lose sight of our point is that the white race, as recorded in the Holy Qur'an by Allah and His Qur'an, teaches us that the white race has been chastised for violating the law of Moses, that they can't follow the law of Allah God, and that we should, be aware of this and, cognizant, be very aware that the white race, even though the people, the critics of the Most Honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad, constantly denounce his teachings as being false, that there is no race in Islam, when we got a basic understanding of the Quran, we could readily see that where Mr. Muhammad's teachings are right and exact, and that the Quran clearly shows that the white race cannot follow the law of God. And in fact, the white race is identified as the people who are the violators of the law of Islam. And we should, again, pay close attention to this and have a basic understanding of the religion that we profess to believe in the book that we revere, the Holy Qur'an. Alhamdulillah. And that's one of the main points that we wanted to cover in this video, is to show, number one, that the Israelites, chapter 17, is referring to the white race. And number two, that Jacob's name, Yaakov's name, was changed to Israel, and that when we read the Quran in particular, when we see children of Israel, the Israelites, is talking about the white race and no other people. And as I said on a few occasions, we should be very careful, those of us who are ascribing that Israel is actually referring to the black nation. We should be careful with that. And if we put that out there, if we teach that, we should qualify that and be very specific as to what we're saying, because it really goes against, without explanation, if you're going to teach that, without explanation, it's causing confusion, and our people are getting a misunderstanding and missing the main point of who the children of Israel really are. Alhamdulillah. Recently, Donald Trump, President of the United States, has said that the United States would now recognize that the country of Israel, the Zionists, that the United States recognizes now that Jerusalem is their capital, and which is a very significant thing from a political point of view and from a spiritual point of view as well. Of course, let us remember that the country in Palestine, Asia Minor, that they call Israel, is led by a political entity or group of Caucasians, Europeans, known as Zionists, and they are using the Jewish religion, if you will, as a cover to promote their political views, and to basically they invaded Palestine. And this is somewhat, tortured history, and we won't go into it. But essentially, the Zionists conquered the Palestinians, or the Arabs, who inhabited the country that is now known as Israel, i.e. Palestine. And Jerusalem, the Jews or the Zionists claimed Jerusalem as their capital, as their ancient capital. But again, we have to remember that Jerusalem was essentially taken from the Jews for violating the law of Moses. When the Romans ran them out of Jerusalem, they conquered them, and as part of their chastisement, they were run out of Jerusalem. Alhamdulillah. And through the centuries of time, when Christianity was formed and was on the march, the Christians took Jerusalem for their own, and then later the Muslims conquered Jerusalem. So we're going to touch on that in a few minutes. Now, in our lessons in Lost Found 1, in question and answer number 5, it says, why did we take Jerusalem from the devil? How long ago? Because one of our righteous brothers, who was a prophet by the name of Jesus, was buried there, and they used his name to shield the dirty religion which is called Christianity, also to deceive the people. So one of the reasons why Jerusalem is sacred or revered to the Muslims is, according to our lessons, is that Prophet Jesus is buried there. His body is hidden, and only the Muslims really know where the body is at, according to the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. Alhamdulillah. And the lesson also says that Jerusalem is a name given by the Jews, which means founded in peace, and it was first built by the original man, the black man, and called Jebus, Salem, and Ariel. Now, from a historic point of view, remember that Palestine, or present-day Israel, was inhabited in ancient times by the black Canaanites. And the city is Jerusalem, or that part of the world, is very, very old. Jerusalem is one of the oldest cities in the world, according to present-day scholars, just to validate that. And if we want to go a little bit deeper just on Jerusalem, remember in the Old Testament, that's where Melchizedek, the king of Salem, another name for Jerusalem, that's where his throne, that's where his seat was at. So, Melchizedek is identified with God in person, if you will, in so many words as described in the Old Testament, in the book of Hebrews, in the New Testament. Alhamdulillah. Now, the Quran says that during Solomon's reign, his capital, his temple was in Jerusalem, and that the Quran says in 3 places that Solomon forced the jinn or devils into service for him to work or labor in building his temple. And this is very interesting sidebar or a fact about Jerusalem itself, because the Qur'an in 3 places says this, and we can find this in chapter 21 verse 82 in the Qur'an, chapter 34 verse 12, and chapter 38 verses 37 and 38. And all 3 of these places in the Qur'an says that Solomon forced the devils or the jinn to work on his temple, that they were forced them into labor, and that they were fettered in chains. And as one commentator, Maulana Muhammad Ali, for those who think that the jinn is referring to spirits or some formless being, says you can't put chains on the spirit. So it's talking about flesh and blood people. And let us bear in mind that the jinn, even though nowadays people think again that the jinn is smokeless fire, if you will, or a spirit, the jinn is actually referring to the white race. And Solomon enslaved the white race when they entered his kingdom in Jerusalem. And the Quran bears witness to that, if you understand it. And just to take it a step further, let us bear in mind that Solomon enslaving the white race, or the Jews, in Jerusalem, is really the backdrop or the framework of the 3rd degree of the Masonic ritual of Hiram Abiff being killed by the 3 ruffians or the 3 devils. Alhamdulillah. So we're only pointing out some things just so we can, broaden our understanding of our religion and different aspects of the history. And in this sense, Jerusalem, since Prophet Muhammad and his night journey is based on him rising above the temple in Jerusalem. So, we're just about at the end of this brief talk on chapter 17 of the Quran, and I want to thank everyone for taking a few minutes out their day to watch and listen to this video. We hope we imparted some useful information that can broaden our understanding of the teachings of the Most Honorable Mr. Elijah Muhammad in the time that we are living in, which is the judgment or the change of worlds, and that we have a better understanding of where we can find the white race in our scriptures. Remember, especially in the Quran, the white race is under the name of the children of Israel, also the people of the book. And these are the people, or the group of people who are condemned or indicted by Allah and His Quran as violating the law of Moses. And that is very clear. That is replete throughout the Quran. This is not something that's isolated or needs to be interpreted or use some twisted logic in order to arrive at this conclusion. This is very clear. And anyone who just has a basic understanding of the Quran knows this, and we just want to bear this in mind, bear this in mind, and to be able to articulate it or speak about it in a very clear and easy to understand manner. Alhamdulillah. So without any further ado or delay, I'd like to close out in the name of Allah and the person of Master Farad Muhammad, the great Mahdi, who was to come and has come to restore us who were lost from our own the kingdom of Islam, and to destroy those who have destroyed us. Thou art our God, O Allah, we are thy people. Deliver us from our murderers, and we will serve and obey thee all the days of our life, and teach thy children thy equal love and mercy for us. Peace, peace. Assalamu alaikum.